How many coaches have been fired in the NFL?
10. Yeah.
I'm not going to get started with that situation. I'm not going to get started with that situation.
My house.
Yeah, I'm not going to get
the house in crime.
She ain't got nothing. I ain't make sure ain't got nothing right.
We have proof.
That's what I'm talking about, baby.
Let's get to the Atlanta Falcons, who have hired Kevin Stefanski. This one's interesting. The Kevin Stefanski sweepstakes was pretty bountiful. He interviewed with a bunch of teams. This is one of those, I bet you this works out better than what you had before things. He was a multi-time coach of the year with awful ownership in Cleveland with the Haslams. He gets fired, deservedly so possibly there, because they've been so bad the last couple of years. Didn't have a problem with the decision, but it doesn't mean he's not a good head coach. Same with Harbaugh, right? So now you get to go somewhere else and try to start over new. He goes to Atlanta.
How many coaches have been fired in NFL? 10. Yeah. I'm not going to get started with that situation, though. I'm not going to get started with that. My house. Yeah. But let's get your instant thoughts in the comments section. Should Deion really be a candidate for the Cleveland Browns head coach job? Type Y for yes, type N for no. So, don't skip a single second of this video. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's begin. That line wasn't an accident. I don't care how casual it sounded. I don't care how quick it came and went, and I definitely don't care how many people are trying to brush it off like it was nothing. Because in this league right here, nothing like that is ever nothing. Especially when it comes from someone who understands power, leverage, and attention better than almost anyone walking the football earth. When I heard it, my first reaction wasn't confusion. It was that feeling in your chest, that pause, that little voice that goes, hold on, did you catch that? Because it didn't feel random. It didn't feel off the cuff. It didn't feel like a joke. It felt deliberate, calculated, like a match being struck in a room full of gas and everyone pretending they don't smell it yet. And that's the thing fans know, even when the media pretends they don't. We've watched this league long enough to understand how it works. Coaches don't just talk. Players don't just talk. Legends definitely don't just talk. Every word is weighed. Every pause is intentional. Every non-answer is an answer if you know how to listen. That wasn't random. That wasn't nothing. That was a message. Look around the NFL right now. Coaches getting fired left and right. Front offices scrambling. Franchises panicking. Power structures shifting in real time. And in the middle of all that chaos, you get a short, cryptic line that instantly sets the internet on fire. That's not coincidence. That's timing. Perfect timing. Because moments like this only land when the ground is already unstable. And trust me, the ground is shaking. Teams don't know who they are anymore. Fans are fed up. Owners are desperate. And when desperation creeps in, so does opportunity. That's when people start showing their cards. That's when old hierarchies get challenged. So when people say, you're reading too much into it, I laugh. Because we've seen this before. We've seen careers pivot on moments smaller than this. We've seen franchises change direction because of a look, a quote, a silence. The NFL is a league built on subtext, and this moment was dripping in it. You felt it too. Don't lie. That little spark of excitement mixed with frustration, the curiosity, the questions. Why say it like that? Why say it now? Why not just ignore it completely? Because ignoring it would have been easy. Saying nothing would have been safe. But this wasn't safe. This was intentional. And here's why it matters. Moments like this don't just comment on the present, they hint at what's coming. They signal movement behind the scenes. Conversations being had, lines being drawn, decisions already halfway made. This is how storms start in the NFL. Quietly. With a sentence everyone pretends not to hear. And if this really was the first rumble of thunder, then what comes next is going to shake a lot of people who thought they were untouchable. All right, let's be honest with ourselves for a second. Because once you strip away the headlines, the hype graphics, and the talking heads forcing optimism, the reality on the ground looks very different than what we were sold. This is where things really stand right now. The team says this hire is about stability. The media says it's a safe, proven move. Analysts are already pulling out the buzzwords experience, system fit, culture reset. You've heard it all before. You can practically predict the talking points before they even finish the sentence. But fans? Fans aren't buying it that easily anymore. Not after everything we've seen. Not after all the promises that never turned into Sundays worth remembering. Because let's talk expectations versus reality. Fans weren't dreaming small. They weren't asking for a placeholder. They were hoping for vision, direction. Someone who actually felt like the future, not a rerun. They wanted creativity, leadership, a coach who could elevate talent, not just manage it. Instead, what showed up feels familiar, in the worst way, another calculated front office decision that looks clean on paper but feels empty in the gut. And that's the disconnect right now. The media wants you to see this as progress. Fans see it as more of the same. Look at the depth chart. Look at the roster. There's talent there, real talent. Young players who need development, not just structure. Quarterbacks who need belief, not just playbooks. Skill guys who need a system that adapts to them, not one that asks them to shrink. This isn't a plug-and-play situation, no matter how much people pretend it is. This is fragile. One wrong move, and it collapses fast. Front offices love to talk about trusting the process, but fans are tired of processes that never lead anywhere. They remember the press conferences, the off-season optimism, the bold statements that quietly died by week 8. So when they're told, once again, that this is the right move, the reaction isn't excitement, it's skepticism. And that skepticism is earned. Because if you're being real, this hire feels like the organization playing defense. Not swinging big, not chasing greatness, just trying not to lose the room. And that might keep things calm for a while, but calm doesn't win divisions. Calm doesn't develop quarterbacks. Calm doesn't scare anybody in January. Fans feel that. They feel the gap between what was promised and what actually arrived. They feel like they were sold ambition and handed compromise. And that's why the reaction online feels so raw, because it's not just about one hire. It's about years of buildup, years of patience, years of waiting for the moment things finally turn. So when people say fans are overreacting, they're missing the point. This isn't panic. This is clarity. This is a fan base looking at the board, reading the room, and saying, we've seen this movie before. And the uncomfortable truth is this: if this move doesn't hit fast, if it doesn't show real growth early, the pressure is going to be massive because the margin for error is gone. And that's where this story starts to get dangerous. Because when expectations collide with reality like this, something always gives. This is where the pushback comes from. And no, it's not just noise. It's not just fans being emotional. And it's definitely not people hating for no reason. This reaction has roots, deep ones. Let's not rewrite history here. The criticism didn't come out of thin air. It came from years of watching the same patterns repeat. Questionable decisions stacked on top of each other. Promises made in January that felt hollow by November. Systems that were supposed to unlock players but somehow made them look smaller, slower, less confident. Fans remember that. They don't forget just because a new press release drops. And that's why people are pushing back so hard right now. You hear it everywhere on Twitter, in comment sections, on group chats that haven't shut up since the news broke. We've seen this movie before. How is this different? Why should we believe this time? Those aren't troll questions. Those are survival instincts from fans who've been burned too many times. Critics point to past failures and say, look, the resume isn't as clean as they're selling it. They talk about stagnation, about offenses that never evolved, about quarterbacks who were supposed to take the leap and never did, about locker rooms that felt tight, tense, unsure. And instead of pretending none of that happened, we've got to acknowledge it because it did. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. The media narrative wants to smooth all that over. They want to frame it as context. Circumstances, bad luck, injuries. It wasn't really his fault. And sure, sometimes that's true. Football is complicated. No coach operates in a vacuum. But fans aren't wrong for asking why the same explanations keep popping up year after year. Because at some point, patterns matter. And when fans see familiar names, familiar philosophies, familiar talking points, the skepticism kicks in fast. They remember the development that stalled, the adjustments that never came, the moments where it felt like the game passed people by while the league evolved around them. That's why the pushback feels personal. It's not just about X's and O's, it's about trust. You can even feel it in how divided the fan base is right now. One side saying, give it time, let it play out. The other saying, we said that last time. Both sides want the same thing. They just don't believe the same people can deliver it. And here's the thing, both sides have receipts. We've seen situations like this before. Think about teams that double down on safe instead of swinging for special. Sometimes it works. A lot of times, it just delays the inevitable. Fans know that. That's why the margin for error feels razor thin already. So when people push back, they're not rooting against success, they're demanding proof. They're saying, show me this is different. Show me growth. Show me accountability. Because hope without evidence is just hype. And until that evidence shows up on Sundays, on tape, in real moments under pressure, the tension isn't going anywhere, it's only building. And the next chapter of this story, it's either redemption or confirmation of everything the critics are afraid of. And that's what makes what comes next so explosive. But here's the part. Nobody wants to admit out loud this might actually work. Yeah, I know how that sounds after everything we just talked about. I know how risky it feels to even say it, but if you really step back and look at the situation honestly, there's a version of this story where the chaos becomes the catalyst, where all the doubt, all the pressure, all the noise forces growth instead of collapse. Because sometimes a clean slate is exactly what's needed. This isn't a team coming off a high. This isn't a coach walking into a perfect situation with zero expectations. This is pressure from day one. And pressure does one of two things in the NFL. It breaks you or it sharpens you. There's no middle ground. And that's where belief starts to creep back in, because moments like this have a way of revealing who people really are. We've seen it before. Think about quarterbacks and coaches who were written off early, who had every reason to fail, and then figured it out because they had no other choice. Jalen Hurts heard the noise. So did Geno Smith. So did plenty of guys who were told, this is your last shot. And instead of shrinking, they locked in. That's the opportunity here. A fresh system means no excuses, no inherited baggage, no, that's how we've always done it. Everyone's starting from zero. That can be terrifying or freeing. Young players finally get a real evaluation. Leaders emerge because they have to. And suddenly, the locker room has a common enemy, doubt. You can already feel how this moment could force accountability. Every practice rep matters more. Every decision gets magnified. And while that kind of spotlight can expose weaknesses, it can also accelerate growth in a way comfortable situations never do. There's also something powerful about being underestimated. When expectations are low, confidence becomes internal. It stops being about headlines and starts being about proving something to yourself. That's when teams get dangerous, when they stop chasing validation and start chasing execution. And let's talk leadership for a second. Pressure reveals leaders fast. Not the loud ones, the consistent ones. The guys who show up early, stay late, take responsibility when things go wrong. Those voices matter more in moments like this than any press conference quote ever could. That's where redemption arcs are born. Because failure isn't the end in this league, it's the classroom. Coaches learn what didn't work. Players learn what won't fly. Systems evolve. And sometimes, the second act is stronger because the first one hurt. I'm not saying this turns into instant success. I'm not saying banners are coming tomorrow, but I am saying this situation has the ingredients for something real if it's handled the right way. Growth doesn't always look pretty. Sometimes it looks uncomfortable. Sometimes it looks messy before it clicks. And that's why fans are leaning forward again carefully, cautiously, but with curiosity. Because if this group embraces the pressure instead of running from it, if they actually learn instead of deflecting, then this moment stops being about skepticism and starts becoming about possibility. And that's when things really get interesting, because belief, once it starts to return, changes everything about what comes next. This is the moment that changes everything, and I'm done pretending it's not. Because when you trace this whole thing back to that first line, that pause, that look, that moment everyone tried to laugh off, it all connects. That wasn't just commentary, that wasn't nostalgia, that was a signal. And signals only matter when something big is about to move. This is one of those moments. I'm not making a safe prediction here. I'm not hedging. I'm not sitting on the fence waiting to see which way the wind blows. I'm saying it straight. This situation is about to force a turning point one way or another, and the league is sleeping on how explosive it could be. Here's the truth. Fans who've been burned before don't want to hear but need to. Chaos creates clarity. It strips away excuses. It exposes who's built for it and who isn't. And right now, the spotlight is so bright that there's nowhere left to hide. That's when real leaders emerge. That's when careers change trajectory. We've seen this exact inflection point before. Think about teams and players who were counted out, mocked, dismissed until the pressure flipped the switch. The league loves to underestimate moments like this because they don't fit clean narratives. They don't show up in preseason power rankings. They don't sound smart on TV. But they show up on Sundays. This is where belief stops being theoretical. This is where preparation meets opportunity. And if this group embraces what's in front of them instead of fighting it, the payoff could be massive. Not perfect, not painless, but real. And I know some of you are rolling your eyes right now because you've heard versions of this speech before. You've bought in, you've waited, you've been patient, and it didn't work. I get that. That frustration is valid. But here's why this feels different. There's no cushion anymore, no grace period, no honeymoon phase. The expectations are heavy, and everyone involved knows it. That changes behavior. That forces urgency. And urgency is dangerous in the best way. So here's my statement. Don't be surprised if this becomes the moment people look back on and say, that's when it shifted. Don't be shocked if the league suddenly starts paying attention after weeks of dismissing it. And don't be shocked if some opinions age badly fast. Because belief doesn't need consensus, it needs commitment. And that's what I'm watching for next. Not talk, not headlines, action. So I want to hear from you, not because it helps the algorithm, but because this is one of those moments fans will remember. Drop your take. Are you buying in? Are you out? Or are you watching with 1 foot in and 1 foot ready to pull back? Either way, stay locked in. Because this story isn't winding down, it's just getting started. And when the next chapter hits, you're gonna want to be here for it.